And now I'm joined by Dr. John Banovetz, Chief Technology Officer of 3M. Full disclosure, 3M is one of our sponsors today, but I wanted to talk to him anyway. So, John, it's great to have you. And I don't know if you've been hearing earlier parts of the program, but I am interested not only in the way we've kind of, bent time, if you will, on vaccine development, but we've also bent time, this is my own assessment, in things like producing PPE, in which we were caught flat-footed in this country for a lot of reasons. Your company is dead center in that discussion. So tell us where you were 10 months ago and where 3M is today. And when it comes to supply, because I don't think this problem is going to go away overnight, where are we in terms of the manufacturing muscle in this country and globally on PPE?
Yeah, well, great to be here and great to be part of it. It's a great discussion. I was able to catch part of the mayor's discussion. It was fantastic. And you're exactly right. I love the analogy you had about bending time, because that's what 3M has done in the industry particularly around our respirator production. So to date, we've delivered 1 billion respirators to Americans, and we continue to make 95 million respirators in the U.S. every month. And so that's a quadrupling of our production. We doubled it last year. We doubled it again. We started ramping up a year ago for this because even though the COVID-19 is unprecedented in its depth and its breadth and its impact, but we've had other pandemics, SARS, H1N1. We've had other areas, X factors we call them, where we've had to actually build production very quickly. And we learned from those experiences 10 years ago, 15 years ago. In two different ways. One, we invested in regional manufacturing so that we could respond regionally. Here in the United States, where most of our production is, we made investments in order to have that surge capacity. To be fair, not fully expecting a COVID-19 type of surge capacity, but some level of surge capacity in our regional manufacturing capabilities. And then the second part that we really ramped up was actually just being able to understand our supply chains as well as our connections and partnerships we've had around the world. So for instance, having a strong working relationship and partnership with the US government, whether that's in regulatory or government trade agencies, has just been critical for us to be able to support and ramp up. And then in COVID, you add on the partnerships, for instance, with the Department of Defense and the production. And it's just very critical for us to have had those relationships and partnerships. And we learn from the past in order to be ready for the future.
I think one of the things that's out there still, and I should, truth and disclosure, I'm writing a piece of this, so anything you say may be used against you. But I'm writing a piece about whether or not, when the president is out there calling for transparency and numbers and what's happening at the state and the local, that last mile, that last inch thing to let people know what vaccines are coming. I don't get the sense. In fact, I've asked the White House. They had committed to get me an answer today. That has not happened yet, on whether or not we have transparency at the state and local level on PPE, because there's a lot of Defense Department partnership. Yeah. So I guess my question is to you is, what's the state of play there?
Yeah, I'd say, well, first, what you're describing, the last mile, the last inch, that's a challenge for any distribution supply chain. It just exists for everything. The PPE, it just heightens it in the pandemic right now. And so it is a critical piece. And the way to we think the way to really fight it is around the data and the data flow that happens along the supply chain. So linking that user at one end all the way to the supplier at the other end, and making sure that the data is aggregated and flows and the information flows between those two. So for instance, as a user of PPE, I may take that and it sends a signal. Think of an electrical grid kind of analogy, but it sends a signal back to the distributor, to the state, and then on to the federal government and to the producers like 3M. And that signal is important, but it's also the right data that has to be there. So one piece of data is just order demand. Certain places want it. But the most important piece of data is probably the inventory levels and the usage that exists at those different places. So obviously a place that may have 3 months of supply of PPE versus a place that may have a week of supply. We'd want to be able to supply the place with a week and make sure we get that. And that's not always correlated to order demand. The second piece is once you get that data and once you have that network, it's important because you can actually then see where the network is lit up, where the signal is running, and where it's not. And that's important because then you can understand, hey, this part of the network is dark. I'm not getting a signal from this area, this geographic area, or this system, or these potential users. What's going on? Should I be supplying PPE there? So from our perspective, one of the big things that can happen is the data flow and the information flow from that end user all the way to the producers. And I really think that's a place where the federal government can step in and help navigate, aggregate the data, connect the dots, if you will, between those two.
So I know if I had Jeff Zients sitting here with me, who's handling a lot of the COVID response, if I had Ron Klain, the President Chief of Staff, who's a data wizard and management, he would get that. If I had a couple of senators I know, Republicans and Democrats, they might say, that sounds really complex. I don't know if we can do that. Are you telling them that what you just shared with me is that we can absolutely know this, that level of transparency is not only possible, but probable?
Yeah, I think you can absolutely have that data. I think you can absolutely have the flow of information. I mean, at each individual step, it exists in some form. The states certainly know who they're distributing to. The distributors know who they're going to, and the end users when they send the signals back. So the data's there if it can be aggregated and pulled together in the right ways. And so I don't think it would be a huge lift. It would take work. Yeah. You have to lot the system. There's some IT, but anyway.
Well, look,
the data should exist and should be able to get it.
Look, everything is near history. So in our near history, we had groups responding to Peter Navarro in the president's team, President Trump's team, and Jared Kushner out there competing with states to grab and essentially hijack PPE that the states had, Larry Hogan in Maryland and others in Massachusetts and others had gotten. So I understand why there is fear and concern about this. But as you look at it now, do you see hoarding from what you're seeing? Do you see hoarding going on in medical systems in states?
Yeah, it's hard. From my chair, it's hard to say that one way or the other. I can tell you things like price gouging, counterfeiting are still big issues for us. We're still fighting them. We still are fighting fraud and counterfeit and are still very active in that, and still look to the partnerships that we have with FEMA and other government agencies in order to change that. So I think that's really a signal or a representation of the incredible demand that exists for PPE and the supply. As I said, we've quadrupled our supply. That's an incredible feat in the last year, but demand has outstripped it. And so things like the price gouging and counterfeiting that we continue to fight and wage against, I think are really also just as critical as I'd put it in that same sort of category.
Just very quickly as we wrap up, John, I want to ask you this, because you have 8,000 scientists who work with you, and I'm sort of interested in government science. We had Francis Collins on here, interested in 3M science, all the kinds of things you're doing. And so two quick questions is, one, what's out there? Is the science ecosystem that you're responsible for cooking up some new cool stuff, and what is it? And secondly, what's a pool party with 8,000 scientists like?
Well, the first question is, when you have 8,000 talented scientists like 3M, there's always something cooking. There's always something different. The pandemic has forced us to think differently. It's forced us to take some of our technology and move it toward biopharma filtration, on purification, on cleaning, disinfectant. So it's amazing. And when you have a culture, an R&D and innovation culture like 3M, it's incredible what people can come up with as they go. And so, to answer your second question, the pool parties is just a blast, right? You're just trading ideas and building on it. We call those pool parties part of an internal organization we call Tech Forum, or our 15% time, and our posters, but they're the funnest days of the year, without a doubt. All
right, well, I'm going to wiggle my way in and crash a party when we can get back to doing that again. When we get past this set of topics, we're all vaccinated and have doing things right. I hope you invite me to the 3M Scientist Pool Party.
Well, we have a great innovation center in Washington. We certainly can extend the invite to you.
Well, great, John. Well, John Banovetz of 3M, Chief Technology Officer and Senior Vice President for Innovation and Stewardship. Thank you so much for joining us today, and also for supporting today's program.
Thank you.